The vending machine groaned as Lucas slammed his fist against it, frustration etched across his face. The machine refused to give up the bag of chips he'd paid for with his last crumpled dollar bill. Around him, the quiet of the city park felt suffocating, broken only by the occasional rumble of a passing car. "Figures," Lucas muttered, kicking the base of the machine. "Nothing works in this city." At 17, Lucas had already learned a harsh truth. The world wasn't built for people like him. He was just another face in a sea of forgotten lives, another statistic waiting to happen. His teachers didn't expect much from him, and honestly, neither did he. What was the point? He crouched down, ready to jimmy the machine's panel with a pocket knife, when a shadow loomed over him. "Trying to outsmart the machine, huh?" a calm voice said behind him. Lucas froze. His heart raced as he slowly turned around, expecting a cop or some nosy park security guard. Instead, he saw a man standing there, hands tucked casually into the pockets of his jacket. The man didn't look like much, a little older, dressed in jeans and sneakers. But there was something about his presence that stopped Lucas in his tracks. "You know," the man continued, his voice easygoing, "if you're this good at figuring out machines, you could probably fix them instead of breaking into them." Lucas frowned. "And who are you, the vending machine police?" The man chuckled. "Not quite. Just a guy who knows talent when he sees it." Lucas rolled his eyes, already turning back to the vending machine. "Yeah, well, talent doesn't pay for lunch." "Maybe not yet," the man said, "but it can change your life, if you let it." Lucas hesitated, his fingers hovering over the panel. There was something in the man's tone, something that made him stop and listen. "Okay, mister. Who are you supposed to be?" The man smiled. "Name's Elon. Elon Musk." Lucas blinked, caught off guard. He'd heard the name before, in viral videos his younger brother liked to watch, on news channels playing in the background at the corner store. But it didn't make sense. What was this guy doing here, talking to him? "Yeah, right," Lucas said, narrowing his eyes. "If you're Elon Musk, what are you doing in this dump of a park?" Elon didn't seem offended. He shrugged. "Sometimes, the most interesting people aren't in fancy offices or big cities. Sometimes they're right here." Lucas folded his arms. "Look, I don't need a lecture, okay? I've got enough people telling me what to do." "I'm not here to tell you what to do," Elon said. "I'm here because I see something in you. And I think you see it too. You're just scared to believe in it." Lucas felt the words hit him harder than he expected. He didn't say anything, didn't know what to say. "You've got two choices," Elon continued, his voice steady but kind. "You can keep doing what you're doing, scraping by, blaming the world for what it's taken from you. Or you can try something different, something better." Lucas stared at him, torn between skepticism and curiosity. "And what's that supposed to be?" Elon's smile widened. "Why don't we find out together?" For the first time in a long time, Lucas felt something stir inside him. Hope? Maybe. Or maybe just the possibility that his life could be more than what it was. But nothing came easy in his world, and trusting someone like this didn't come naturally. What would you do if you were Lucas? Would you take a chance on a stranger's offer, or would you walk away? Stay tuned for the next chapter as Lucas takes his first step toward a life he never thought possible. Lucas hesitated, eyeing the man before him. Could this guy really be the Elon Musk? It sounded ridiculous. And yet, there was something about his calm demeanor, his confident yet unassuming presence, that made Lucas pause. "You seriously expect me to believe you're the richest guy in the world?" Lucas scoffed, shoving his hands into his hoodie pocket. "You don't even look rich." Elon chuckled, brushing imaginary dirt off his jacket. "Good. Means I'm doing something right. But this isn't about me, Lucas." The sound of his name startled Lucas. "Wait, how do you know my name?" Elon shrugged casually. "Heard one of your friends calling you earlier when I was walking through. Figured I'd stop and say hi." Lucas narrowed his eyes. "So you're just some random billionaire walking around, listening to people's conversations?" Elon didn't flinch at the sarcasm. "Call it curiosity. You'd be surprised how much you can learn just by paying attention." Lucas leaned back against the vending machine, folding his arms. "Okay, Mr. Curiosity, what do you want from me?" "It's not about what I want," Elon said. It's about what you want. Elon's words hung in the air, and for a moment, Lucas didn't know how to respond. What did he want? For most of his life, wanting anything felt pointless. Dreams didn't pay the rent. Ambition didn't stop the eviction notices from piling up on their door. I don't want anything, Lucas said, his voice quieter now. Wanting stuff just makes it worse when you don't get it. Elon tilted his head, studying him. That's not true. Wanting something gives you a direction. Even if you fail, it teaches you something. Lucas scoffed. Easy for you to say. You've got, what, $1 gazillion? Elon didn't take the bait. I had nothing once. No money, no safety net, no guarantee that any of my ideas would work. But I wanted something better, and I worked for it. Yeah, well, I'm not you, Lucas muttered. Good, Elon said, smiling. The world doesn't need another me. It needs you. If you're ready to step up. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. And how am I supposed to do that? Magic? Or are you going to wave a check at me? No checks, no magic, Elon replied. Just an opportunity. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Opportunity to do what? To change your life, Elon said simply. Elon pulled out a business card and handed it to Lucas. The card was unassuming, white, with nothing but Elon's name, phone number, and email address. What am I supposed to do with this? Lucas asked, flipping the card over. Think about what you want, Elon said. When you figure it out, call me. But know this, doing nothing is also a choice. Before Lucas could respond, Elon turned and started walking away, leaving him standing there with the card in hand. Lucas watched him go, a mix of emotions swirling inside him, doubt, confusion, and a tiny, stubborn flicker of hope. Could this be real? Was this man actually offering him a way out of the life he'd been stuck in? As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, Lucas clutched the card tightly. Maybe it was a scam. Maybe it was a joke. But what if it wasn't? If you were in Lucas's shoes, would you take the chance? Or would you let the card sit on a shelf, collecting dust? Next time, Lucas faces a choice that could change everything. Don't miss it. Lucas sat on the cracked stoop of his apartment building, the faint hum of the city buzzing around him. The card in his hand felt heavier than it should. It had been 2 days since he met that man. 2 days of rolling the conversation over and over in his head. Figure out what you want, he muttered mockingly, flipping the card between his fingers. What I want is not to live in this dump. His gaze drifted across the street, where a group of older boys from the neighborhood were huddled together, laughing. They were his usual escape, his partners in mischief. No expectations, no dreams, just a momentary distraction from the grind of daily life. Yo, Lucas, one of them called out. You coming or what? We're heading to the tracks. Lucas hesitated. The tracks usually meant hanging out at the abandoned rail yard, maybe tagging a wall or messing around until the cops chased them off. It was what he always did, routine, mindless, and safe in its own twisted way. But then he felt the card's smooth edge beneath his thumb. Inside the apartment, his mom's voice carried through the thin walls. She was on the phone, arguing with a landlord or a bill collector. Lucas didn't need to hear the words to know how it would end. Another door shut in their faces, another impossible decision to make ends meet. Lucas, she called suddenly. He stuffed the card in his pocket and stepped inside, bracing himself for the lecture. What now? He asked, leaning against the doorway. His mom turned, her face a mix of exhaustion and worry. You've got to stop running around with those boys. Do you know what people in this neighborhood are saying about you? About me? Lucas rolled his eyes. Why does it matter what they think? They don't care about us. It matters because you're better than this, she said firmly. And if you don't believe that, you'll end up just like... She stopped short, her face tightening. Like Dad? Lucas snapped. Her silence was answer enough. You always bring him up like I'm supposed to care. He bailed on us, Mom. Why should I try to be anything more? Because you can be, she said, her voice breaking. You're smart, Lucas. You've got a good heart. But you're throwing it away, and I can't stand by and watch it happen. After dinner, Lucas slipped back outside, needing air. The card was still in his pocket, and he pulled it out under the dim glow of a streetlight. The name Elon Musk stared back at him. He could call the number, take a chance on whatever this stranger was offering. Or he could toss the card and let things stay the same. Maybe he'd end up like the guys on the corner, aimless but comfortable in their mediocrity. Or maybe worse. A voice interrupted his thoughts. "Yo, Lucas, you comin' or not?" Lucas turned to see his crew waiting, their laughter echoing down the block. He looked back at the card, then at the boys. "What's it gonna be, Lucas? Would you follow the same path, surrounded by the familiar? Or take a leap into the unknown, risking everything for a chance at something more?" Stay tuned for the next chapter as Lucas makes a decision that could alter the course of his life forever. Don't miss it. The night was restless. Lucas lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, the card still clutched in his hand. The voices of his friends, his mom, and Elon Musk swirled in his mind like a storm. Each one pulled him in a different direction, leaving him suspended in uncertainty. By the time the first light of dawn crept through his window, Lucas sat up with resolve. "Screw it," he muttered, grabbing his phone. His fingers hovered over the numbers. What was he even going to say? What if this whole thing was just some weird fluke? Or worse, a trap? "Don't overthink it," he whispered to himself. And with a deep breath, he dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Lucas's nerves flared with each second. "Hello?" A calm, professional voice answered on the third ring. Lucas hesitated, caught off guard by how formal it sounded. Hi. I met Elon Musk the other day. He gave me this card." There was a pause on the other end. "Ah, yes. Mr. Musk mentioned you might call. One moment, please." Lucas's heart raced. "What is this?" Moments later, another voice came on the line. This time, it was unmistakable. "Lucas, I was wondering when you'd call," Elon Musk said with a faint chuckle. Lucas sat up straighter, his mouth suddenly dry. Yeah. I wasn't sure if this was real." "Well, it is," Musk replied. "The question is, are you ready to figure out what's next for you?" Lucas swallowed. I don't know. I don't even know where to start." "That's fine," Musk said, his tone encouraging. "Most people don't. But here's the thing. You've already taken the hardest step by calling. The rest is just deciding how far you're willing to go." Musk's voice was calm but direct. "I'm going to make you an offer, Lucas. I run a program for young people who have potential but lack opportunities. It's a chance to learn, to work on projects that matter, and to find out what you're really capable of." Lucas blinked, his mind racing. "Why me? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Musk replied. "You've got drive, even if you don't see it yet. And I believe in taking chances on people who deserve them. So, what do you say?" Lucas hesitated. It sounded too good to be true. What if it was a setup? What if he wasn't good enough? But then he thought about his mom's tired face, the endless cycle of dead ends, and the look his friends gave him when he said he wanted more. "What would I have to do?" Lucas asked cautiously. "For now, just show up," Musk said. "I'll have someone pick you up tomorrow morning. Be ready at 8 a.m. As the call ended, Lucas sat in stunned silence. For the first time in as long as he could remember, there was a flicker of hope. Real hope that his life could change. But doubt crept in just as quickly. Could he trust this? Could he trust himself? Would you take a leap of faith, even if it felt like stepping into the unknown? Or would fear keep you rooted in the same place? Join us in the next chapter as Lucas steps into a world he never imagined. Don't miss it. The following morning, Lucas stood at the curb in front of his apartment, a light drizzle soaking through his hoodie. He shifted from one foot to the other, glancing nervously up and down the street. What if they don't show? He thought, clutching his phone like a lifeline. But at precisely 8 a.m., a sleek black Tesla Model X glided into view, its headlights cutting through the gray morning. Lucas froze as the car stopped in front of him. The passenger door swung open, and a sharply dressed man stepped out, his movements precise and practiced. "Lucas?" the man asked with a polite smile. "Why, yeah," Lucas stammered, feeling suddenly self-conscious in his worn sneakers and faded jeans. "I'm Daniel. Mr. Musk asked me to bring you to our offices. Shall we?" Lucas hesitated, his heart pounding. This felt like a scene out of a movie, one he didn't belong in. But he forced his feet to move, climbing into the car's luxurious interior. The leather seats seemed to swallow him, and the faint hum of the electric engine was a stark contrast to the noisy chaos of his neighborhood. The drive was surreal. Skyscrapers loomed ahead as the Tesla sped through the city, leaving Lucas's familiar streets far behind. Daniel didn't talk much, which only heightened Lucas's nerves. Finally, they pulled into a sleek building with floor-to-ceiling glass windows. Inside, everything was polished metal and futuristic lighting. Lucas barely had time to process his surroundings before Daniel led him into a private elevator. "Mr. Musk is waiting for you," Daniel said as the doors slid open on the top floor. The office was minimalist yet overwhelming. A massive glass wall offered a panoramic view of the city, and in the center of the room, Elon Musk stood, casually scrolling through a tablet. "Lucas," Musk greeted warmly, setting the tablet aside. "Glad you made it." Lucas shifted awkwardly. Thanks. This place is something else." Musk chuckled. "It takes getting used to. Come, sit." They sat across from each other at a sleek table. Musk leaned forward, his piercing gaze locked on Lucas. "Tell me about you," Musk said simply. Lucas blinked. There's not much to tell, really. I live with my mom. I've made some bad choices. Got into trouble a few times. But," he hesitated, not sure how to finish the sentence. "But you want something more," Musk finished for him. Lucas nodded. "Yeah." Musk leaned back, studying Lucas for a moment. "Here's the thing, Lucas. I'm not offering a handout. I'm offering an opportunity. But it won't be easy. You'll have to work harder than you've ever worked before. Are you ready for that?" Lucas swallowed hard. "I think so." "No," Musk said firmly. "You need to know so. Because if you're not committed, this won't work. But if you are, I'll make sure you have the tools to succeed." Lucas felt the weight of Musk's words. This wasn't just some charity project. This was real. "I'm in," he said, his voice steady despite the nerves tightening his chest. Musk smiled. "Good. Let's get started." Lucas has taken the first step into a world he barely understands. But can he rise to the challenge, or will his old habits pull him back? What would you do if the chance of a lifetime was handed to you? Stay tuned for the next chapter as Lucas begins his journey and discovers what he's truly made of. Don't miss it. The next few days blurred together for Lucas. He had never experienced anything like it. His world, once limited to the streets he knew so well, the corners of the block, the basketball courts and bike racks, had suddenly expanded into something unrecognizable. A life he never imagined. A life filled with structure, hard work, and most importantly, a constant challenge. It all started when Elon Musk's team handed Lucas a schedule that looked like it belonged to someone far more important than him. 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., training, it read. 10:30 a.m. to 12 p.m., coding. After lunch, he was assigned mentorship with the best of the company's engineers. The rest of the day was filled with workshops, exercises, and more learning, each one more demanding than the last. By day 2, Lucas felt the exhaustion seeping into his bones. He was not used to such long days, nor was he accustomed to being pushed to think beyond his limits. But the worst part wasn't the fatigue. It was the self-doubt that crept in whenever things got tough. "I'm not supposed to be here," he thought more than once, his hands trembling as he sat in front of his laptop, trying to absorb lines of code that seemed like an entirely foreign language. The frustration was overwhelming. It was the late afternoon of the third day when it happened. Lucas had been struggling all day to complete a coding exercise that felt impossible. His frustration had reached its peak, and he was ready to throw in the towel. But then, something clicked. He looked at the screen again, and for the first time, the jumble of letters and numbers began to make sense. With a deep breath, Lucas began typing faster, his fingers moving with newfound confidence. When he hit enter, the code executed flawlessly, and the program ran as intended. He sat back, stunned. "I did it," he whispered to himself. "I really did it." It wasn't just a technical victory, it was a personal one. Lucas had broken through his own walls, proving to himself that he was capable of so much more than he had ever believed. The next morning, Musk arrived at the office to check on Lucas's progress. Lucas stood up when he saw him enter, his heart pounding with anticipation. You look like you've made some progress, Musk observed with a slight smile. Lucas nodded, his voice still full of disbelief. I finally finished the coding exercise. I mean, it worked. The program actually ran. Musk's smile widened. I knew you had it in you. But don't get comfortable. This is just the beginning. The road ahead is long, and the only way to keep moving forward is to push yourself even harder. Lucas felt a mixture of pride and fear. He was starting to understand what Musk meant. There would be no easy path, but the rewards would be greater than he ever imagined. But as the days went by, something else started to emerge. It wasn't just the pressure of the work. It was the pressure of his past creeping back in. The old Lucas, the one who skipped school, the one who barely made it through each day without getting into trouble, was starting to make himself known. On the 5th day, as Lucas walked back to the apartment after another grueling day at the office, he found himself stopping at the corner store. Without thinking, he grabbed a can of soda, the same one he used to drink when he was hanging out with his old friends. He held the can in his hand, staring at it for a long moment. It's just a soda, he told himself. But I know this is the kind of thing that always pulled me back before. He tossed the can into the trash without opening it. Not this time, Lucas thought. Not this time. Lucas was at a crossroads. Every day was a battle, between the old version of himself and the new. Between the street-smart kid who had always done just enough to survive, and the young man who was beginning to realize his true potential. Would he continue down this path, even when it felt like he didn't belong? Or would he go back to the life he knew? Lucas knew the stakes were high. This wasn't just a career opportunity. This was a chance for him to change everything, to break free from the cycle he'd been trapped in for so long. But change wasn't easy, and the temptation to give up was always just around the corner. The road ahead will challenge him in ways he never imagined, but this time, there's no turning back. Will he rise to the occasion or fall back into old habits? Only time will tell. What do you think? Will Lucas continue fighting for his future? Let us know in the comments below. And stay tuned for the next chapter as Lucas faces his biggest test yet. You won't want to miss it. The days blurred into weeks, and for every step Lucas took forward, it felt like there were two pulling him back. The pressure of the new life, the weight of expectations, and the ever-looming shadow of his old self were starting to tear at the seams of his resolve. It was a late Thursday afternoon when it all came crashing down. Lucas had been pushing himself harder than ever, but his body and mind were beginning to show signs of strain. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, his hands shaking from too many cups of coffee and too few hours of rest. That day, Elon Musk was scheduled to give a lecture to a select group of young innovators, and Lucas had been invited to sit in. But when the moment came, as Elon began to speak about the power of perseverance and innovation, Lucas couldn't help but feel the weight of his own insecurities. He couldn't focus. His thoughts kept drifting to the life he had left behind. His friends, the easy way he used to get by. For a brief moment, the life at the company felt like a distant dream, something that didn't belong to him. I'm not cut out for this, Lucas thought, the doubt sinking deep into his chest. Later that evening, as Lucas sat alone in his small apartment, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but the area code was familiar. His heart sank as he answered it. Lucas, this is Jamal. The voice on the other end made his stomach twist. It was one of his old friends from the streets. We've been trying to reach you. Where you been, man? You left without a word. We miss you down here. We're all just trying to survive. You feel me? You got something good up there, but don't forget where you come from. Lucas's hand tightened around the phone. He hadn't heard from Jamal in weeks, not since he'd left his old life behind. Jamal's words pulled at him, bringing back the memories of the life he'd thought he'd escaped. The street life, the quick money, the false sense of belonging. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned off the phone and threw it across the room, frustration flooding through him. The next morning, as Lucas walked into the office, his thoughts were still clouded. He wasn't sure what he was doing anymore. Did he belong here, or was he just playing a part in a world that would never truly accept him? That's when Elon Musk appeared, as if reading his mind. He walked up to Lucas's desk and sat down across from him, his expression serious but understanding. Lucas, I can see the weight on you, Musk said, his voice low. I know this is hard, but you have something no one else here does. You've lived a life that most people can't even imagine, and that's why you're here. You have a fire inside of you. Don't let anyone or anything snuff it out. Lucas looked down at his hands. The weight of Musk's words hit him harder than anything before. He had been given a chance, an opportunity to change, to build something for himself that was bigger than the streets. But the pressure, the doubts, and the pull of his past were like a tidal wave crashing against him. That night, as Lucas sat alone, he faced the most difficult decision of his life. The streets were calling him back, but so was this new life, one filled with challenges, growth, and the chance to rewrite his story. But was he strong enough to keep going? What do I want? Lucas asked himself. Do I want to be the person who settles for the easy way out? Or do I want to fight, really fight, for the future I know I could have? He thought of his old life, of Jamal, and the temptation to return to what was familiar. He thought about the lessons he was learning, the people he was meeting, and how, for the first time, he had something worth fighting for. The next day, Lucas made a decision. It wasn't easy, but it was clear. He didn't pick up the phone when Jamal called again. Instead, he walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. He was done looking back. The past had shaped him, yes, but it wouldn't define him anymore. As he sat down at his workstation, his mind raced. The code he'd struggled with earlier seemed less daunting now. He focused. He typed. And with every keystroke, the doubt that once held him back began to fade away. Lucas had finally embraced the fight. The fight to keep going when everything around him wanted him to stop. The fight to break free from his past and build a future worthy of his potential. But the journey was far from over. With every step forward, new challenges arise. Will Lucas remain on the path he's chosen, or will temptation draw him back? Only time will tell. What do you think? Can Lucas keep pushing forward, or will the past catch up with him? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and share. Stay tuned for the next chapter. You won't want to miss what happens next. Lucas felt the pressure easing, just slightly, as he threw himself into his work. The rhythm of the coding, the deadlines, and the excitement of building something with his own hands began to make sense. For the first time in months, he felt alive, like he was meant to be here, not just filling space but creating. But the darker shadows of his past were never far behind. The phone rang again. This time, Lucas hesitated before answering. It was Jamal. Lucas, man, you ain't answering. You really out here living the high life, huh? Jamal's voice had that old familiar edge. I get it, man. You found something better than this place. But you ain't gotta forget about us. We just trying to make it. You feel me? It's been rough out here without you. Lucas clenched his jaw, gripping the phone tight as memories of his old life came flooding back. He'd never truly left the street mentality behind. It still called to him when things got tough. And lately, things were getting tough. The work, the pressure, the constant feeling that he was still pretending to be someone he wasn't. It was eating at him. It was easier, simpler, to go back to what he knew, to hang with Jamal and the others, to forget about the pressures of this world. He thought about the fast cash, the thrill, the sense of belonging. No one expected anything of him. No one cared what he became. They just wanted to survive, and sometimes that felt like the only thing he could control. Later that day, as Lucas walked out of the office, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was Elon. He was waiting outside, looking uncharacteristically serious. Lucas, Elon began, his voice steady. I've been watching you. I know the struggles you're going through. There's a lot of pressure on your shoulders, but you've got something I believe in. This place, the work we're doing, it's bigger than any street corner or old life you've left behind. Don't let it pull you back. Lucas stared at him for a moment, unsure of how to respond. Musk's words were true, but they felt like too much responsibility, too much of an unknown future. What if I'm not cut out for it? Lucas asked quietly, more to himself than to Elon. What if I go back to who I was? Is it too late? That night, Lucas couldn't sleep. The temptation was so close he could almost taste it, the pull of his old life. He got in his car and drove down familiar streets, the neon lights flashing in the distance. He didn't even know where he was going at first. just that he had to get away from everything that had been pressing on him lately. He ended up in front of the old corner store where he used to hang out with Jamal and the others. The same group of guys were gathered around, laughing, shouting, and slinging jokes. Jamal spotted him first. "There he is, the man of the hour," Jamal said with a grin. "I see you made it out the rat race. Come join us, bro. You don't gotta be all stiff with them people up there. We still got your back." Lucas stood there for a moment, feeling the familiar tug of old loyalties, the warmth of friends who didn't expect him to be anyone other than who he was. He felt himself taking a step forward. But then, something stopped him. He couldn't explain it, but Lucas felt a shift inside him. The old life wasn't him anymore. It wasn't who he wanted to be. He'd fought too hard to get this far. For the first time, he felt a sense of purpose, not one defined by the streets, but by what he could build with his own hands, his own mind. "Thanks, but I can't," Lucas said, shaking his head. "I've got something else now. Something worth more than just getting by. I'll see you around." As he turned away, the weight in his chest didn't lift entirely, but it shifted. He had made a choice, not just with his feet, but with his heart. He was no longer the kid who lived for the moment. He was someone who had to fight for his future, and he wasn't going to throw that away. The next day, Lucas walked into the office with a renewed sense of determination. He didn't feel completely free of the pull of his past, but he knew that he couldn't let it define him anymore. Elon caught him at lunch and clapped him on the back, noticing the change in his demeanor. "There you are. I knew you'd get it." Lucas nodded, meeting his gaze. "I think I'm starting to understand what you meant." Elon smiled, his eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and something else. "Good. The real challenge starts now." Lucas's journey wasn't over. It wasn't enough to simply make a choice. He had to live with it. Every decision, every temptation would test him. But he wasn't the same boy who had left the streets behind. Now, he was someone with a future he had to fight for. Lucas has made a choice, but will it be enough to keep him on track? Will his old life keep pulling him back? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know if you think Lucas can stay the course. Don't forget to like and share, and stay tuned for the next chapter. You won't want to miss what happens next. The weeks following Lucas's decision to stay at the tech company were filled with ups and downs. He had made a commitment, but the path ahead wasn't as smooth as he'd hoped. Every step forward seemed to come with 2 steps back. The distractions from his past were relentless, testing his resolve in ways he hadn't anticipated. At the office, the work was intense. Lucas found himself buried in code, trying to keep up with his team, but the constant pressure was starting to take a toll. His mind kept drifting back to the streets, to the people who knew him as a kid who didn't have to try. The weight of expectations, the constant reminder of who he was supposed to be now, began to feel suffocating. It wasn't just the work. Elon's faith in him, the sense of responsibility, all of it was beginning to feel like too much. Every conversation with Elon, every meeting, felt like it was pushing him further into a corner, making him question if he could truly live up to the vision others had for him. And then, as if the universe was testing him, Jamal called again. "Yo, Lucas, man, you're still with that fancy tech stuff?" Jamal's voice had that edge again. "I saw you posted something about this big presentation, but we both know you ain't really happy. You remember how we used to just roll, do our thing. No pressure. You're tripping, bro." The words hit harder than Lucas wanted to admit. He tried to brush it off, but deep down, the doubts crept in. Was he fooling himself? Was he really cut out for this new life? Or was he just trying to play a role he wasn't meant for? One evening, after a grueling week of deadlines, Lucas found himself at the edge. He needed a break, something to clear his mind, to remember who he was before all of this started. He texted Jamal. They'd meet up at the usual spot. When he showed up, the familiar faces greeted him with laughs and jokes, like nothing had changed. They passed him a drink, and for a brief moment, Lucas felt like he had found his way back home. The camaraderie, the ease. It was the life he knew, the life that was simple and free of expectation. But as the hours passed, something inside Lucas felt wrong. The weight of the choice he'd made earlier in the year was pressing harder than before. He wasn't sure anymore if he was really here because he wanted to be, or because he didn't know how to say no. The line between the old Lucas and the new one had begun to blur. It was then that he saw the flashes of neon lights in the distance, the familiar cars pulling up, some of the old faces from the street crew. And there it was, the decision. Stay and blend back in with everything he used to be, or walk away once again and keep trying to make this new life work. "Lucas," Jamal said, his voice heavy with something Lucas couldn't quite place. "You ain't gotta keep fronting for those people. They don't care about you like we do. You don't owe them anything." Lucas felt a rush of anger, frustration welling up inside him. "What the hell do you know about them? About what I've been trying to do?" Jamal's eyes softened, but there was a warning in his gaze. "I know you, man. You're still the same. You just forgot who you are. Don't let them fool you." It was the same conversation they'd had 100 times. The same choice he'd been asked to make since the moment he left that life behind. And now, here he was again, standing at the crossroads. The next morning, Lucas woke up with the weight of the night before hanging over him. He knew what he had to do, but it felt harder than ever. The pull of his old life was strong, and the guilt of leaving it behind made every new step feel like he was walking through quicksand. It wasn't until he met with Elon later that day that something clicked inside him. Elon was his mentor, but he wasn't there to hold his hand. He was there to challenge him to be more, to be something greater than his circumstances. "You're going through a tough time, Lucas," Elon said, his voice calm, yet firm. "But this is the point where most people quit. They let the past take over because it's easier than fighting for a future they can't see yet. You've already come too far. Don't throw that away." Lucas stared at Elon, feeling the weight of his words sink in. This was the moment he'd been waiting for, waiting to either turn back or move forward. And just as quickly as the temptation had surfaced, it began to fade. "I'm not turning back," Lucas said, his voice steady now. "I know where I'm headed." It was a small step, but it was the right one. That evening, Lucas returned to his apartment, sat down at his desk, and pulled up the project he'd been working on. There was still a long way to go, and a part of him knew that there would always be challenges, always be temptations. But for the first time in months, Lucas felt a sense of calm. He was back on track, not just in the world of technology, but in the world of possibility. Lucas has made his choice, but the temptation is never truly gone. The road ahead will only get more difficult. What do you think will happen next? Will he be able to stay true to his new life, or will the pull of his past drag him back? Comment below with your thoughts and share this chapter with someone who might need a little reminder that it's never too late to choose a better path. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Lucas's journey is far from over. Lucas had come a long way since the night he'd confronted his past, but the challenges ahead were far from over. Every step he took in the world of tech felt like walking on a tightrope. One misstep, and he could lose everything. But despite the pressure, he refused to be swayed. He had made his choice. He wasn't turning back. The first few weeks after his decision to focus on his career were brutal. There were long hours at the office, endless deadlines, and the constant fear that he would mess up. The tech world didn't cut any slack for newcomers, especially ones like Lucas who didn't have a clean slate. But what truly shook him was the subtle tension from the people around him. The colleagues who had once been friendly now eyed him with suspicion. The whispering in the halls was unmistakable. "It's all part of the game," Lucas told himself. "They don't get it. They don't know where I've come from." Still, it gnawed at him. He felt like an outsider, like he wasn't quite worthy of being there. It was the same feeling he'd had in school when he was the kid no one believed in, the kid who was always overlooked. But this time, he had something different. He had his vision, his future, and that was enough to keep him going. One afternoon, while Lucas was trying to finish a project, his phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but something in his gut told him it was important. When he answered, it was Jamal on the other end. "Yo, Lucas, we need you, man." Jamal's voice was urgent, almost frantic. "Things are getting rough out here. You remember Ricky, right? He's in trouble, big trouble. We need someone with your skills to help." Lucas hesitated, a knot tightening in his stomach. He knew exactly what this meant. It was the test of loyalty. His old life, his old crew, calling him back. They needed him, and he couldn't deny that a part of him still cared. But he had made a promise to himself, to Elon, to everyone who believed in him. He wasn't the same kid who would drop everything for a chance to prove himself on the streets. "I'm not coming back, Jamal," Lucas said, his voice firm, even as he felt his heart race. "I'm done with that life. I'm trying to make something better for myself now." There was a long pause on the other end, and when Jamal spoke again, his voice was colder. "You think you're too good for us now, huh? You've forgotten where you came from, Lucas. You can't just forget about us." The words hit hard, but Lucas didn't flinch. He couldn't go back. He wouldn't go back. Later that day, Lucas found himself in Elon's office, feeling like he needed guidance. He wasn't sure why, but he needed reassurance that he was doing the right thing. "Loyalty is a complicated thing," Elon said, leaning back in his chair. "I've had people who stood by me through thick and thin, and others who walked away when things got tough. But here's the truth. Loyalty doesn't mean doing the same things over and over. It means standing by your values, even when it's hard." Lucas felt a wave of relief wash over him. Elon's words resonated deeply. He wasn't betraying his past by choosing a better future. He was simply evolving. But just when Lucas thought he was free from the pull of his old life, the pressure mounted. Ricky, the friend Jamal had mentioned, ended up in serious trouble with the law. The streets were calling for someone to step in and take responsibility for what had happened. Jamal came to him again, this time with even more urgency. "Lucas, we can't handle this without you. You've got the connections, the skills. Don't turn your back on us now." It was a crossroads Lucas hadn't anticipated. Was he supposed to be the hero for people who had always expected him to fail? Could he balance the loyalty he still felt to his old friends with the new path he was carving out for himself? He didn't have an answer. All he could do was trust himself, the choices he'd already made, and the life he was building. He wasn't going to throw it all away. Not now, not for anyone. The next morning, Lucas called Jamal. "I'm not coming, Jamal. I'm sorry. I have to keep going forward. I'm not that person anymore." There was silence on the other end before Jamal finally spoke. "Fine, do what you want. But don't come crawling back when things fall apart." Lucas hung up, the weight of the conversation still heavy on his chest. But as he sat down at his desk that afternoon, he realized something. His choice had been hard, but it was the right one. For the first time in his life, he was in control. And the best part? He was no longer running from his past. He was learning from it, building on it, and using it to propel him forward. Elon's words echoed in his mind as he dove back into his work. The greatest obstacle isn't the world around you. It's the one inside. Once you beat that, nothing can stop you. Lucas had made it through the hardest test of all, the test of loyalty. He wasn't abandoning anyone by moving forward. He was choosing a better future for himself, and for anyone who would be inspired by his journey. Lucas has chosen his path, but the road ahead is still filled with challenges. What do you think he will do next? Will he remain steadfast in his pursuit of a better life? Or will his past continue to try to pull him back? Share your thoughts below and keep following Lucas's journey. The best is yet to come. Comment with your thoughts and share this chapter with someone who needs inspiration to stay true to their journey. Stay tuned for the next chapter. Lucas's story is just beginning. Lucas's decision to cut ties with his past came with a price he hadn't fully anticipated. As the days went by, the pressure grew. His old friends, especially Jamal, were not content to simply let him go. They made it clear that his choice to leave them behind didn't just hurt them. It had consequences. It was an ordinary Tuesday when it all went south. Lucas was heading out of the office for a quick break when he felt something off, a strange chill in the air. The sidewalk was crowded with people, but there was a noticeable tension. As he turned the corner to grab coffee, he saw it. A group of men, faces familiar but cold, standing across the street. His heart sank as recognition set in. It was Jamal's crew. "Yo, Lucas!" one of them called out, their voice carrying across the street. The words felt like a challenge, an unspoken dare. Lucas stopped dead in his tracks. His stomach churned. He had hoped that this was over, that the phone calls, the subtle threats, would stop once he'd made his decision. But he had been wrong. They were making sure he knew there would be consequences. The men approached, their steps deliberate, the air thick with unspoken animosity. Lucas could feel the weight of their stares, the old familiar pressure that used to define his life. But now, it felt different. He wasn't that scared kid anymore. "Thought you were too good for us now, huh?" one of the men sneered, taking a step closer. Lucas held his ground, his posture straightening as he took a deep breath. "I didn't think I was better than anyone. I'm not the same person anymore." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one moved. But then Jamal's voice cut through the tension, low and menacing. "You left us behind, Lucas. You think you can just walk away and not pay the price? You think you can forget where you came from?" Lucas's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood tall, unwilling to show fear. "I didn't forget. I'm just moving forward. You guys are still stuck in the same cycle. I can't be a part of that anymore." Jamal's face twisted in anger. "You think this is your world now? You're a fool. You'll see soon enough. You can't escape this, Lucas." Before Lucas could respond, the men turned and walked away, their parting words lingering like a promise of things to come. The confrontation left Lucas shaken, but more than that, it filled him with a burning resolve. The threats, the challenges, they only made him more determined to prove that he could make it, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't rise above their circumstances. But it wasn't just about proving something to them. It was about proving it to himself. He wasn't going to be intimidated. He wasn't going to be defined by the mistakes of his past. That night, as he sat at his desk in his apartment, Lucas stared at his phone, wondering if he should call Elon. But before he could dial, a message came through from an unknown number. It was from Jamal. "You've been warned, Lucas. Don't say we didn't give you a chance. Next time, it won't be words." Lucas's hand trembled as he read the message. He didn't want to go back to that life, to the constant fear and uncertainty. But the reality was clear. His past wasn't letting him go that easily. Lucas knew he had two choices. He could back down and try to patch things up with Jamal and the crew, maybe even return to the old life to keep the peace. Or he could stand firm in his decision, accept that some people would never understand, and continue down the path he had chosen. His mind raced as he weighed his options. One life would keep him stuck in a never-ending cycle of pain and fear. The other was uncertain, but it held promise, a future that was his to define. The doorbell rang, pulling Lucas out of his thoughts. He wasn't expecting anyone. He hesitated for a moment, then stood and walked to the door. When he opened it, his heart skipped a beat. It was Elon. "Can I come in?" Elon asked, his voice calm but serious. Lucas stepped aside, feeling the weight of the moment. He knew this wasn't just a casual visit. Elon had heard about the trouble Lucas had been facing. The rumors had started to spread, and Elon had come to see if Lucas was okay. "I know what you're going through," Elon said, sitting down across from Lucas. "I've had my fair share of people who didn't believe in me, who thought I was crazy, who thought I'd never make it. But here's the thing. You have to learn to ignore the noise. You can't let people drag you back into the past. The price of progress is never cheap, but it's always worth it." Lucas nodded, feeling the weight of Elon's words settle in his chest. He had been given a chance to change his life, but that didn't mean it would be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. "You've got a choice now, Lucas," Elon continued. "You can let them pull you back, or you can keep moving forward. The people who matter will be there for you when the dust settles. And the rest? They're just noise." Lucas stared out the window, the city lights blinking below. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever came next. He wasn't alone in this journey, not anymore. The question was no longer whether he would rise above his past. The question was how high he could go, and he was ready to find out. Will Lucas stay true to his new path, or will the weight of his past continue to haunt him? What do you think he should do next? Should he confront Jamal and the crew, or keep pushing forward on his own? Let us know your thoughts and share this chapter with anyone who needs encouragement to rise above their past. Keep following Lucas's journey. His story is just beginning. Leave a comment and share this chapter to inspire someone else today. What will Lucas choose? The next few days passed in a blur for Lucas. The message from Jamal still lingered in his mind, gnawing at him. He could feel the pressure mounting, like a storm on the horizon. No matter how hard he tried to focus on his work, the threats, the looming danger, kept pulling his attention away. At the office, Lucas's hands trembled as he typed, his mind constantly drifting to what had happened. He could still hear Jamal's voice, feel the heat of the confrontation, and worse, he could feel the weight of his past like a shadow, following him no matter how far he tried to run. But today was different. As he stood up to stretch and get some fresh air, Lucas spotted a man standing near the entrance of the building. He was tall, wearing a dark coat that blended into the shadows. There was something about the way he stood there, waiting, that immediately set off a red flag in Lucas's mind. It was like he was being watched. Lucas hesitated, feeling his heart rate spike. He couldn't tell who the man was, but the sense of unease crept up on him like an invisible hand closing around his throat. The man was scanning the crowd, his eyes sweeping over the people around him until they locked onto Lucas. For a moment, everything stopped. The world around him blurred as the man's gaze intensified. Lucas's pulse raced, and a knot twisted in his stomach. He knew this feeling. This was not a coincidence. The man was there for him. But why? A cold sweat broke out on his skin as the man started to move towards him. The walk was slow, deliberate. The closer he came, the more Lucas's instincts screamed at him to run. But he didn't. He couldn't. When the man reached him, he didn't speak at first. He just stood there, watching Lucas closely. His face was hard to read, but there was something cold in his eyes, something that made Lucas's blood run cold. "I'm here to deliver a message," the man said, his voice low and menacing. Lucas's stomach dropped. He could feel the old familiar fear creeping back, threatening to overtake him. "A message from Jamal," the man continued, taking a step closer. "He said to tell you, no one walks away from him, not without consequences." Lucas's mind raced, his heart hammering in his chest. He had to act. He couldn't let fear control him anymore. Not after everything he had worked for. "Tell Jamal I'm not afraid of him," Lucas said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I've already made my choice. He can't take that from me." The man's eyes narrowed, studying him for a moment, before he gave a low chuckle. "You'll regret this," he muttered, turning to leave. Lucas watched as the man disappeared into the crowd, the message clear. Jamal wasn't finished with him yet. But Lucas wasn't going to back down. Not this time. As Lucas stood there, the weight of the man's words hung heavy in the air. He knew the storm was coming. The price of his progress was not going to be cheap. The people from his past weren't going to let him walk away so easily. But as the fear ebbed away, a quiet strength began to take its place. He had been given a second chance, a chance to change his life, and he was going to fight for it. He wasn't going to let anyone, especially Jamal, dictate who he was or who he could become. He was more than his past, and it was time to prove it. But Lucas couldn't do it alone. He knew that much. He needed to reach out, to lean on the people who believed in him, to find strength in the support he had. And that's when he thought about Elon. Elon had offered him a chance, a glimpse into a different world. A world where people didn't get stuck in the cycle, where they could rise above their circumstances. And now, Lucas had to make the hardest decision of all. Would he lean on that support, or would he take matters into his own hands and face the storm alone? What do you think Lucas should do next? Should he turn to Elon and his new connections for help, or should he stand firm and face Jamal and his crew head-on? Will he rise above the threats of his past, or will they pull him back into the chaos? Comment below and share your thoughts. What would you do if you were in Lucas's shoes? And don't forget to share this chapter with others who might need some encouragement to face their own challenges head-on. The choice is never easy, but it's always ours to make. Lucas stood at the edge of his apartment balcony, staring out into the city skyline as the sun dipped below the horizon. The chaos of the day was still fresh in his mind. The warning from Jamal, the pressure mounting from all sides, and the silence in his own heart. He knew he couldn't keep running from his past, but he also couldn't let it define him any longer. As the night crept in, Lucas felt the weight of his choices hanging over him. His past had always been a shadow, looming over him, always pulling him back. But tonight felt different. He had been offered a chance, a way out, a chance to break free. The question was whether he would take it. He couldn't stop thinking about Elon and the world he had stepped into, a world that had seemed so far out of reach just months ago. Would he continue to fight for that future, or would he let the threats of his past drag him back into the darkness? The phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking his train of thought. He pulled it out, his heart racing when he saw the name on the screen. It was Elon. Lucas hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what to say, what kind of conversation they were about to have. But deep down, he knew this could be the turning point, the moment when everything changed. "Hey, Elon," Lucas said, his voice uncertain but steady. "What's up?" "I need to see you." Elon's voice came through the phone, firm and calm. "We need to talk about what's coming next." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. He knew that Elon had the connections, the power, and the resources to help him, but there was always a price. The kind of power Elon wielded was not without its challenges. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this, man," Lucas admitted. "The pressure, the danger, it's a lot. And now Jamal's still out there. What if it's too much?" Elon's response was quiet but resolute. "I know it's a lot, but you don't have to face it alone. You've already come further than most people could. You've made a choice to change, and that's powerful. But change doesn't come easy, and it's not always safe. You need to be prepared for what comes next. But I'm here. I won't let you fall." The words hung in the air between them. Lucas felt something stir within him, a sense of hope, perhaps, or maybe it was just the realization that he didn't have to navigate this fight alone. For the first time in a long time, Lucas felt like he was on the brink of something bigger than himself. But the question still loomed. Was he ready to step fully into this new life, knowing the dangers that awaited him? As if on cue, Lucas's phone buzzed again. It was a text from his old friend, Tarek. "Bro, I heard about what's going on with Jamal. I've got your back, no matter what." Lucas smiled, the weight of the world lifting ever so slightly from his shoulders. He had friends who believed in him, friends who weren't going to let him fall. But even with that support, he knew the road ahead was still treacherous. The war with Jamal wasn't over, and the stakes were higher than ever. Lucas had a choice to make. He could either stand by and let fear dictate his future, or he could take control and face the consequences head-on. The risks were real, dangerous, even, but so was the opportunity that lay on the other side. He knew one thing for sure. This was his moment. He couldn't keep waiting for someone to save him. He had to save himself. As he stared at his phone, considering Elon's offer, a surge of determination ran through him. He wasn't going to let his past define him anymore. He wasn't going to let Jamal or anyone else hold him back. The decision was his. The future was in his hands. What will Lucas do next? Should he trust Elon and step into a new world of power and influence, or will he continue to fight his battles on his own terms? Is it time to break free from the past, or is he risking everything by doing so? What would you do? Comment below and let us know what you think Lucas should do next. Don't forget to share this chapter and inspire others to keep pushing forward in their own journeys. The road ahead is uncertain, but the strength to face it comes from the choices we make. Lucas stood up from the balcony, the cool night air brushing against his skin. The city beneath him looked so different now, like a maze of possibilities instead of a place of struggle. His thoughts were scattered, but one thing was clear. He had reached a crossroads. The life he once knew was slipping further into the past, and the future was waiting for him, just beyond his grasp. But to reach it, he'd have to take a leap of faith. The phone call with Elon still echoed in Lucas's mind. He had listened to the reassurances, but now that the call had ended, doubts had begun to creep in. Was he really ready to take this step? Was he strong enough to face whatever lay ahead? For a moment, he thought of his old life. The life where survival was about staying hidden, staying under the radar. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe in its own way. Jamal's threats had kept him in check, making him fear for his future. But here was Elon, offering him an escape, a chance to rewrite his story. Change doesn't come easy, Lucas whispered to himself. He repeated Elon's words. Maybe that's why so many people never leave. It's easier to stay in the pain you know than to risk stepping into the unknown. But Lucas had never been the type to back down, not even when the odds were stacked against him. Lucas pulled on his jacket, his hands shaking slightly as he grabbed his keys. He couldn't waste any more time. He had a choice to make, and it wasn't going to wait for him to feel ready. He took one last look at the apartment, the small room filled with the remnants of his old life, the posters, the clutter, the memories of days spent hiding. It all seemed so far away now. He had no idea what the future held, but the past wasn't going to be his anchor anymore. An hour later, Lucas found himself standing outside the luxurious high-rise building where Elon had invited him to meet. The cold wind was biting, but it didn't bother him. What bothered him was the uncertainty. This wasn't just about money or power. This was about redefining everything he had ever known. He couldn't afford to second-guess himself now. Taking a deep breath, Lucas walked through the entrance and into the lobby. The sleek, modern design felt foreign to him, but there was a sense of excitement building within him. This was the beginning of something. It wasn't just another meeting. It was the start of his new life. Elon greeted him with a firm handshake, his expression serious but welcoming. They didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Lucas," Elon said, his voice low and focused, "you've got potential, but potential isn't enough. You've got to be willing to fight for it. What I'm offering you is more than just money. It's influence, it's connections, and yes, it's power. But with that comes responsibility. Are you ready to shoulder that weight?" Lucas looked him in the eyes. This wasn't some business deal. It was a challenge. A challenge to prove he could handle the pressure, to prove that he wasn't the same kid who ran from every problem. "I'm ready," Lucas said, surprising even himself with the confidence in his voice. "I've had enough of running. I've had enough of letting fear decide my future. If this is what it takes to change, then I'm all in." Elon nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Good. Because change doesn't just happen. You have to make it happen. And it starts now." The meeting with Elon lasted longer than Lucas expected. They talked about strategy, influence, and the steps Lucas would have to take to position himself for success. The things Elon was offering weren't just about money. They were about power, knowledge, and, most importantly, control over his own destiny. When Lucas left the building that night, he was a different person. He didn't have all the answers, but he had a direction. The weight of the world still pressed down on him, but now it felt like a weight he could carry. The city around him seemed different as he walked back to his apartment. It wasn't just the neon lights or the hum of life. It was the feeling that, for the first time, Lucas was in control. He wasn't running from anything anymore. He was stepping into a world where he could finally make his own choices. But even as he walked away from the building, he knew that the hard part was still ahead. The road would be long, and the dangers still lingered. Jamal was out there, and there would be people who would try to stop him at every turn. But Lucas wasn't the same person he had been when this all started. Lucas had made his choice. He was stepping into the unknown, ready to face the challenges ahead. But the question remained. Would he stay true to his path, or would he let the pressures of his past pull him back into the life he had fought so hard to leave behind? What do you think? Will Lucas rise to the occasion, or will the shadows of his past consume him once again? What would you do in his shoes? Comment below with your thoughts on Lucas's decision. Share this chapter and encourage others to take control of their futures. The journey isn't over, and the road to greatness is never easy, but it's a journey worth taking. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. His mind raced with all the possibilities, all the things he could achieve now that he had the chance to rewrite his future. But with every new opportunity came an equally daunting challenge. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the city streets, Lucas stood at the crossroads of his new life. The world around him was brimming with potential, but it also felt more dangerous than ever. Jamal's threats still echoed in his mind, reminding him that nothing in his past was truly behind him. Every step forward felt like a test of resolve, a challenge to stay true to the path he had chosen. His phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking him out of his reverie. With a sigh, he pulled it out. It was a text from his old friend, Jace. "Jace, heard you've been busy. Word is, you've been talking to Elon Musk. You think you can just walk away from where you came from?" Lucas felt a twinge of unease. Jace wasn't the type to let things go easily, especially not when it came to the old life Lucas was trying to escape. He read the message again, feeling the weight of his past pressing in on him. Jace had always been the wild card, loyal but reckless, with no qualms about getting his hands dirty. Lucas typed a quick response. Lucas, I'm not walking away. I'm moving forward. You should try it sometime. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, and for a moment, he regretted it. But it was too late now. There was no turning back. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and phone calls with Elon's team. Lucas dove into his new role with determination, but the pressure was mounting. Every decision felt like it had the potential to change everything. He wasn't just some kid anymore. He was stepping into a world where every move he made had consequences. Despite the excitement, doubts lingered. The weight of the responsibility sometimes felt too much to bear. But as he sat at his desk, surrounded by papers and plans, something inside him clicked. This was what he had wanted. This was the chance to make a real difference. But it wasn't just about business. It was about proving to himself that he could rise above the mess he had been born into. He wanted to show the world that he wasn't just another product of his environment, that he could be more. It was late one evening when Elon invited him to another meeting. This time, it was at a more private location, a sleek conference room high above the city. Lucas arrived early, his nerves on edge. He knew this meeting could be a turning point. As he entered the room, he saw Elon already sitting at the table, reviewing some papers. He looked up as Lucas approached, offering a nod of acknowledgement. "You're doing well," Elon said, his voice low but encouraging. "But remember, success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you become along the way." Lucas took a seat, processing the words. This wasn't just business advice, it was a life lesson. Elon wasn't just teaching him how to succeed. He was teaching him how to live. "Do you ever wonder," Lucas started, his voice thoughtful, "if we're just playing a part in someone else's story? Like, we're only given these opportunities because someone decided we were worth it?" Elon's gaze didn't waver as he responded. "Life doesn't hand you anything. You have to take it, claim it. But once you do, it's up to you how you shape it." After the meeting, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The taste of success was sweet, but it came with an edge. The temptation to fall back into old habits, to seek comfort in the familiarity of his past, was stronger than he liked to admit. He went home that night and found a message from Jace again. This time a voice memo. "Jace, on the voice memo you think you've got it all figured out, don't you? You're a big shot now, talking to Elon Musk like you're somebody. But you're still one of us. And when the time comes, you'll come crawling back. You always do." Lucas's chest tightened as he listened. The words stung, but they didn't break him. He had heard them before, from people who didn't understand what it meant to change, to take control of your future. He deleted the message without responding, but the words lingered. He wondered if Jace was right. Was he really different now, or was he just fooling himself? The next morning, Lucas stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. Who was he now? The boy who ran the streets, or the man who was shaping a new future? The road ahead was never going to be easy. He knew that. But the challenge wasn't just about success. It was about staying true to the person he was becoming. The past was a shadow that would always be there, but it didn't have to define him. Lucas had made it this far, but now came the hardest part. Holding on to who he was becoming, even when the past called to him. Lucas stood by the window, looking out at the city below. There was no going back. He knew that now. But with the world at his feet, the question remained. Would he rise above the noise and the chaos, or would he fall back into the darkness of his past? He had come too far to give up now. The man in the mirror wasn't the same person he had been a year ago. But would it be enough? What do you think Lucas should do now? Will he remain strong, holding on to his new path, or will the temptation of his old life pull him back? Tell us what you would do if you were in his shoes. Would you fight to stay true to your transformation, or would the pull of your past be too strong? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This is just the beginning for Lucas, and his journey is far from over. Stay tuned for more. His story is only getting started. The pressure of maintaining his new life weighed heavily on Lucas, but he couldn't afford to let it break him now. He had come too far. Each day felt like a tightrope walk, balancing the opportunities that Elon Musk had opened up for him, the people who expected him to succeed, and the ever-present pull of his old life. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the pull of the streets. It was in his blood, ingrained in every step he took. His past was a force of nature, a gravity that constantly threatened to drag him back down. One evening, as Lucas was walking back to his apartment, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call from Jace. Lucas hesitated for a moment. Part of him didn't want to answer. He knew Jace's calls rarely brought good news. But another part of him couldn't resist. Maybe he was hoping that talking to Jace would offer him some clarity, something that could anchor him in this storm of uncertainty. He pressed the green button and brought the phone to his ear. "Yo, man," Jace's voice crackled through. "You think you're better than us now?" Lucas felt a wave of frustration hit him. "Jace, we've been through this. I'm not better than you. I'm just trying to make something of myself." "Trying to make something of yourself? You're forgetting where you came from, bro. I see the way you've been moving, all high and mighty with Musk. But let's be real. Ain't no one gonna trust you if you keep acting like you're better than your own people." Lucas's heart raced. The familiar sting of guilt and defensiveness flared up. "I'm not acting like I'm better. I'm just trying to get out, Jace. You should try it too." There was a pause on the other end. Then Jace's voice came through low and slow, like he was trying to catch Lucas off guard. "I'm telling you, you're not gonna make it in that world. You're one of us, Lucas. You'll always be one of us. And when you fail, don't come running back." Lucas gripped the phone tighter, his knuckles white. "You don't know what you're talking about." Jace hung up without another word. The call left Lucas shaken. Jace's words echoed in his mind. "You'll always be one of us." He had tried so hard to leave that world behind, to step into something greater, something more. But every time he took a step forward, it felt like his past was right there, pulling him back, reminding him that no matter what he did, he'd always be tied to it. The doubt crept in, slow and insidious. Was Jace right? Was this all just an illusion? Could he really change? Could he truly leave it all behind? The next few days were a blur of high-stakes meetings, new connections, and the constant hum of ambition in the air. But the tension in Lucas was mounting. The pressure to succeed, to prove that he belonged in this new world, was taking a toll. He found himself second-guessing everything, every decision, every conversation, even every move he made. One evening, after another grueling day at the office, he sat alone in his apartment, staring at the wall. The phone buzzed again. It was an email from Elon Musk's team, confirming a major project they had been working on for months. The news should have been exciting, but it only made Lucas feel more isolated. He couldn't help but wonder if he was ready for this. Was he really the man Elon thought he was? Or was he just a kid from the wrong side of town, playing dress-up in a world that didn't belong to him? As Lucas sat there, deep in thought, the doorbell rang. He got up and opened the door, surprised to see an unfamiliar face standing in the hallway. The man was dressed in a sharp suit, holding a briefcase in one hand. "I'm looking for Lucas Green," the man said in a low, calm voice. "That's me," Lucas replied, confused. The man smiled slightly. "I've got something for you." Without saying another word, the man handed him a thick envelope, then turned and walked away. Lucas closed the door and sat back down, the weight of the envelope heavy in his hands. He opened it carefully, pulling out a letter. It was from Elon Musk. "Lucas," the letter began, "I've seen the way you've been handling the pressure lately. I know things are difficult, but I want you to remember why you're here. I didn't bring you into this world to just follow orders. I brought you in because you have something most people don't, something real. It's not about fitting in. It's about standing out." Lucas sat in stunned silence, the words sinking in. For the first time in days, he felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't just some kid from the streets. He had something that could change the world, and it was up to him to decide whether or not he would use it. The letter wasn't just encouragement, it was a challenge. Elon was giving him the opportunity to prove himself, to show that he was more than his past, more than the kid Jace had once known. This was his moment to rise above. Lucas stood up, the weight of the decision pressing on him. He wasn't going to let his past define him. He had been given a chance, one that most people would never get, and he was going to take it. He looked at the city outside his window, the lights flickering in the distance like 1,000 opportunities. This was his chance to write his own story. What would you do if you were Lucas? Would you take the chance and rise above your past? Or would you let the doubts hold you back? Leave your thoughts in the comments below and share how you would handle the pressure. Lucas's journey is only just beginning. Stay tuned for what happens next. Lucas could feel the weight of Elon's letter in his pocket, a reminder of the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. He had always dreamed of getting out of the cycle of poverty, of breaking free from the world he was born into. But now that he had a real chance to do so, he wasn't sure what that would look like. The pressure felt suffocating. Every decision felt like it could make or break everything. As the days passed, the tension in Lucas only grew. The more he worked, the more his thoughts turned to his old life. Jace's words echoed in his head. "You'll always be one of us." It was a mantra that made it hard for Lucas to forget where he came from. One night, as he passed by a familiar street corner, he saw a group of old friends hanging out. The familiar faces smiled at him, waving him over. They were standing near a graffiti-covered wall, the same place where he used to spend his nights, hustling, trying to find his way. For a moment, he hesitated. Part of him wanted to join them, to feel that sense of belonging again. But then, he remembered the life he was building, the opportunities he had fought for. He couldn't let himself be dragged back down. He turned away, walking past them, but a familiar voice called after him. "Yo, Lucas, you think you're too good for us now? Too good for the streets?" Lucas stopped in his tracks, a cold sweat forming on his brow. He didn't turn around. "I'm not too good for anyone, Jace," he muttered under his breath, "but I'm not coming back." That night, Lucas stayed up late, sitting at his desk, staring at his laptop screen. The faces of his old friends lingered in his mind, their eyes filled with expectation. The weight of his past was pulling at him, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid. He opened the email from Elon again, reading the words carefully, trying to understand the challenge Elon had laid before him. "It's not about fitting in, it's about standing out." Those words struck a chord deep inside Lucas. He wasn't here to fit into someone else's mold. He was here to forge his own path. The next morning, Lucas made a decision. Lucas arrived at the office early the next day, determined to make a difference. He started taking on more responsibility, volunteering to lead projects and share ideas. His colleagues had always respected his intelligence, but now they were starting to see his drive. It was as if a switch had flipped inside him, and the young man who once struggled to stay afloat was now determined to rise above every challenge. As he sat in a strategy meeting later that week, Elon Musk walked in, his presence commanding the room. He nodded at Lucas as he took a seat across from him. "I've been keeping an eye on you, Lucas," Elon said, his voice calm but intense. "You're making progress, but there's more to do. I think you're ready for something bigger." Lucas's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Elon leaned forward. "I want you to head up a new initiative. It's risky, but I believe you're the right person for it. This could be your moment to shine." Lucas felt his palms sweat. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. But it wasn't just about proving something to Elon or the company. It was about proving something to himself. "I'm ready," Lucas said, his voice steady. Elon smiled, a rare expression of approval on his face. "Good. I knew you were." That night, as Lucas prepared for the new initiative, he took a moment to reflect on how far he had come. He had started out just like any other kid from his neighborhood, broken, uncertain, and with little hope for the future. But now, he was standing on the edge of something incredible. The project Elon had entrusted him with was a massive undertaking, one that would change the way people lived and interacted with technology. It was a challenge unlike anything Lucas had faced before, but he was determined to rise to it. As he sat at his desk, drafting ideas and strategies, Lucas knew that the hard work was just beginning. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles, but he was ready. This time, there was no turning back. The world is full of challenges, and sometimes, the hardest part is believing in yourself. Lucas faced his demons, overcame his doubts, and stepped into his future. What about you? Do you have the courage to leave your past behind and rise to the challenges in your own life? Share your thoughts and join the conversation. Let's support each other in stepping into the future with confidence. Stay tuned for the next chapter in Lucas's journey. Lucas stood at the edge of the rooftop, staring out over the city. The bright lights of the skyline stretched for miles, the endless possibilities in front of him both thrilling and terrifying. His mind raced with the enormity of the new project he was about to lead. It was a breakthrough opportunity, one that would change everything. Despite the excitement, there was a gnawing fear deep inside him. What if he failed? What if he wasn't ready for this? He had spent his entire life fighting against the odds, but this was different. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about creating something that could affect the world, something that could change lives. As the evening sky darkened, a message popped up on his phone. It was from his old friend Jace. "Yo, Lucas, you out here thinking you're all that? You ain't built for this. You don't belong in that world." Lucas stared at the message, feeling a sting of doubt. But the words didn't have the same power over him anymore. He knew what Jace was trying to do, drag him back to the life he had worked so hard to leave behind. The life of distractions, of meaningless nights, of broken promises. He deleted the message without responding. The following week, Lucas began to dive deep into the project Elon had assigned him. It wasn't just about technology, it was about connection. Elon had tasked him with developing a platform that would bring communities together, a social network designed to break down barriers and foster understanding. The idea was big, bold, and ambitious. And for the first time, Lucas felt like he had a real chance to make a lasting impact. He began to meet with different teams, collaborating on ideas, strategizing how to bring the vision to life. His confidence grew as he saw how much people believed in him. They respected his unique perspective, the raw determination that had carried him this far. It was like he was seeing the world through new eyes, a world of opportunities he had never imagined. 1 month later, Lucas stood before a packed conference room, ready to present his progress on the project. He had worked tirelessly, long hours poring over every detail, and now it was time to show what he had accomplished. His heart raced as he looked out over the room, knowing the stakes were high. This was it. This was the moment he had been working for. He clicked the remote, and the first slide appeared on the screen. The future of connection. He spoke with passion, his voice steady but full of excitement. As he walked the audience through the concept, the ideas flowed smoothly. He could see their faces, their reactions, their genuine interest in what he was saying. It was clear. They were buying into his vision. They believed in him. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. For a moment, Lucas just stood there, taking it all in. He had done it. The feeling of accomplishment was overwhelming. Just as the applause died down, Lucas's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, expecting another message from his team, but instead, it was a call. He answered without thinking. "Lucas, it's Elon." His heart skipped a beat. "I was in that meeting. What you just did was incredible. You've got something special, something no one else here has. I'm giving you a new role. I want you to lead this initiative. Full-time. It's yours." Lucas could barely breathe. A part of him wanted to say no, to step back and question if he was truly ready. But he didn't. He knew deep down that this was the moment. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving himself right. "I'm in," Lucas said, his voice confident. As the days passed, Lucas dove deeper into his new role. The pressure was mounting, but so was his determination. He was no longer that kid wandering the streets, looking for a way out. He was a leader, someone people looked up to. He had built his foundation on hard work, resilience, and a refusal to quit. He thought back to the time when he would have been satisfied with just surviving. Now, he was aiming for something more, something meaningful. He wasn't just going to change his own life. He was going to change the world. But the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, moments of doubt. But Lucas was ready, and he knew. As long as he kept pushing forward, he was unstoppable. Lucas has made his choice. He's stepping into the future, leaving his past behind, and taking control of his destiny. What about you? Are you ready to make a change in your own life? Don't let fear hold you back. The future is waiting, and it's yours to shape. Share your thoughts and join the conversation. What's one thing you're doing today to move closer to your goals? Let's take this journey together. Stay tuned for the next chapter in Lucas's story. Lucas sat in his office, staring at the blueprint for the new project. The company's trust was in his hands now, and the weight of it felt heavier than he had expected. Just a year ago, he had been wandering the streets of his old neighborhood, getting by with nothing more than a hope that someday, things might be different. Now, he was leading one of the most ambitious initiatives in the tech world, a platform designed to connect people from all walks of life, breaking down social barriers. Despite his success, there were moments when doubt crept in. What if they were wrong about him? What if he wasn't cut out for this after all? The old voices from his past whispered in his mind, reminding him of the kid who had never been good enough for anything. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was a text from his mom. "Lucas, don't forget where you came from. Stay humble, stay grounded." He smiled at her words. His mom had always been his anchor, reminding him that success wasn't just about money or status. It was about making a difference and staying true to who you are. But staying grounded was harder than it seemed. That afternoon, Lucas made a decision. He needed to reconnect with his roots, to remind himself of why he had worked so hard to get here. He needed to remember the streets he had grown up on, the people who had seen him at his worst and believed in him when no one else did. He drove to his old neighborhood, the one he had left behind in pursuit of something bigger. The streets looked the same, yet different. Some parts had been gentrified, the old shops replaced by shiny new buildings. But there were still the familiar faces, some of them older, others unchanged. Lucas parked his car and walked down the block, his heart racing. He had avoided coming back for so long, afraid of what it might mean, but now, he realized he had nothing to fear. He stopped in front of an old corner store, the same one he used to hang out in with his friends. The store's owner, Mr. Walker, was behind the counter, just as Lucas remembered him. "Mr. Walker," Lucas called, smiling. The older man looked up, his face breaking into a grin. Well, look who's come back. Lucas, right? What's it been? 10 years. More like 15, Lucas chuckled, stepping inside the store. "You still running this place?" "Of course. Someone's got to keep the neighborhood together." Mr. Walker wiped his hands on his apron. "I heard about your success. Heard you're doing big things now." Lucas felt a surge of pride mixed with guilt. He had left this place behind, but it had shaped him into the person he was today. As they caught up, Lucas couldn't help but feel the pull of the past. He had left behind not just his old neighborhood, but also the version of himself that had once been lost in it. That version of him still lingered in the corners of his mind, a reminder of the struggles and the mistakes he had made. Mr. Walker could see it in his eyes. "You okay, Lucas? You look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders." Lucas sighed, leaning against the counter. "It's hard. I've got this big opportunity, but sometimes I wonder if I'm ready for it. Like, what if I mess it all up?" Mr. Walker studied him for a moment, then said, "You've got heart. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You've already proven that. It's not about being perfect, it's about staying true to your word. You've got that in you." Lucas nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. As he left the store and walked back to his car, Lucas thought about Mr. Walker's words. He had been given a chance to lead, not just the project, but to influence the world around him. It wasn't just about creating a tech platform. It was about creating a space where people could connect, where they could rise above their circumstances. The weight of that responsibility was heavy, but it was a responsibility he was willing to carry. Back in his office, Lucas sat down at his desk, feeling a newfound sense of clarity. The fear of failure was still there, lurking in the back of his mind. But the fear of not trying was far greater. He knew what he had to do. There was still much work to be done. The project was in its early stages, and Lucas knew there would be countless obstacles ahead. The challenges of scaling, the pressure from investors, the constant battle against doubt. It was all a part of the journey. But this time, Lucas felt prepared. He had the strength to push through, and he had a vision that kept him moving forward. It was time to stop questioning his worth. He had earned his place at this table, and he was going to make the most of it. Lucas is on a path of transformation. He's faced his doubts and fears head-on, and now, he's ready to lead. What about you? Are you ready to face your own doubts and step into your true potential? The next chapter of your life is waiting. It's time to stop holding back and take the leap. What will you do today to step closer to your dreams? Share your thoughts and take action. Let's keep this journey moving forward. together. The sun was setting as Lucas stood by the window of his office, looking out over the city. The skyline gleamed in the fading light, a reminder of how far he had come. But with each passing day, the weight of the work ahead only grew heavier. His company was gaining traction, but the real challenge had just begun. He wasn't just trying to build a business, he was trying to change lives. The announcement had been made, and now Lucas was preparing for the press conference that would solidify his company's place in the tech world. It wasn't just a typical media event. This was his chance to speak directly to the people who had supported him along the way, those who believed in him when he was nothing more than a kid with a dream. "Are you ready, Lucas?" Ethan asked as he walked into the room, his laptop under one arm. He had been a constant source of support, not only as a friend but as a mentor. His expertise had helped Lucas navigate the complex world of business. "I think so," Lucas said, his voice betraying his nerves. "But it's different this time. This isn't just about the company. It's about everything I've worked for, everything I've stood for. It's about proving that someone like me can make a difference." Ethan smiled knowingly. "I've been there. But you're not just anyone, Lucas. You've already proven that. Now, it's time to show the world what you're really capable of." As Lucas stepped onto the stage, the flashing lights of the cameras were blinding. For a moment, everything seemed to blur. The faces in the audience, the buzzing of the microphones. It all faded away until there was nothing left but the words he was about to speak. He cleared his throat, his heart racing. "Thank you all for being here today. I know what some of you might be thinking. Who is this kid and why should we care? And to that, I say, I've been where you are." The crowd was silent, hanging on to every word. Lucas continued, his voice steady now. "I wasn't born with privilege. I wasn't given the opportunities that others had. But I was given something that no one could take away. The drive to push forward, no matter what. And that's what I want to share with the world. An opportunity for anyone to rise above their circumstances, just like I did." The applause was overwhelming, but Lucas wasn't done yet. "We are launching a platform that will break down the barriers between us, whether it's race, class, or anything else that divides us. This isn't just about business. This is about creating something that will make a real impact on people's lives." As Lucas left the stage, he was met with a flurry of reporters, each eager to ask questions. The pressure was immense, but Lucas was ready for it. He had a mission now, one that went beyond profit. He wanted to create a space where anyone, regardless of their background, could connect, collaborate, and succeed. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Lucas's company was gaining momentum, attracting attention from investors, tech enthusiasts, and the media. But with the success came the pressure to deliver. As the platform grew, so did the expectations. It wasn't enough to simply succeed. Lucas had to prove that his vision was more than just a business strategy. It was a movement. Ethan had been with him every step of the way, helping to navigate the challenges of scaling. "You're doing great," Ethan reassured him one evening as they reviewed the latest data. "But don't forget, the real impact of this project won't be measured in dollars. It will be measured in the lives you change." Lucas nodded, absorbing the weight of those words. He had started this journey with the hope of transforming his own life, but now it was about something bigger than himself. It was about creating opportunities for others to rise, just as he had. As the platform gained popularity, stories began to surface. People were using it to connect with mentors, build businesses, find jobs, and collaborate on projects that were making a real difference. The ripple effect was happening, and it was more powerful than Lucas had ever imagined. One story that stuck with him was about a young woman named Tasha, who had used the platform to connect with a network of engineers. She had been struggling to get her foot in the door in a male-dominated industry, but had used the platform to build relationships that led to a job offer. Her message to Lucas was simple: "You changed my life." And it wasn't just Tasha. There were hundreds, then thousands of stories like hers. Lucas had set out to create a platform that would break down barriers, and he had succeeded. But success came with its own set of challenges. The platform's rapid growth had drawn the attention of competitors, and soon, Lucas was dealing with attacks from industry giants who saw his innovation as a threat. They launched smear campaigns, trying to discredit him and his company. For the first time in months, doubt began to creep back in. Would they be able to survive the onslaught? Were they strong enough to keep fighting? Ethan could see the worry in Lucas's eyes. "Don't let them get to you," he said firmly. "This is just a test. You've already come this far. You know who you're doing this for." Lucas knew Ethan was right. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but nothing worth doing ever was. As the challenges mounted, Lucas felt more determined than ever. He wasn't just building a company. He was building a movement. It was time to fight for what he believed in, to protect the platform and the people who had placed their trust in him. The road ahead would be tough, but Lucas wasn't backing down. Now, the question is, will you let obstacles stop you from chasing your dreams? Will you stand up for what you believe in, no matter how hard it gets? The next chapter of your life starts now. Don't wait for the world to change. Be the change. What will you do today to make a difference? Share your thoughts, and let's take action together. The phone call came late that night. Lucas had just finished a long day at the office, reviewing contracts and meeting with partners. The hours had blurred into one long stretch of decisions and strategy. He was used to the pressure now, but the weight of it was never easy to bear. The caller ID flashed a name that made Lucas freeze for a moment. Elon Musk. He hadn't spoken to Elon in weeks. After the press conference, everything had been moving so fast. But the truth was, Lucas had been trying to push away the nagging feeling that he was somehow failing to live up to the massive expectations placed on him. He swiped to answer, his pulse racing. "Lucas," Elon's voice was calm, almost too calm. "How's everything going?" "I'm managing. Things are moving fast. The company's growing, but we're facing some hurdles. Some pretty big ones. I heard. The media's been tough on you." "Huh? Competition coming at you from all angles?" "Yeah. It's been rough," Lucas admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But we're pushing through. I'm not giving up." Elon paused for a moment, as if weighing his words carefully. "I didn't reach out to talk business, Lucas. I wanted to give you a piece of advice." Lucas sat up straighter. Elon wasn't the type to offer unsolicited advice. He had always admired the way Elon thought and approached challenges. "Go ahead," he said. "You're about to face the hardest part of this journey. This is the part where most people either rise to the occasion or break under the pressure. It's going to get messy. The attacks, the doubts, the pressure. It'll all get worse before it gets better." Lucas felt the weight of those words settle into his chest. He had always known this moment would come, but hearing it from someone who had weathered storms of his own gave it a new kind of significance. "You've got something special, Lucas. But what matters now is how you handle the chaos. You can't just be a businessman. You have to be a leader, a symbol of what's possible when you push past the noise." Lucas took a deep breath, steeling himself for the battle ahead. He had made it this far, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it away from him. "Thank you, Elon," he said. "I won't let it break me." "I know you won't. But remember, don't let it define you either. Make your own story." The call ended, and Lucas sat in silence for a moment. He wasn't just fighting for his company anymore. He was fighting for the dream he had built, for the people who had put their trust in him. And, most importantly, he was fighting for the kid he used to be, the one who had always dreamed of something bigger. The next few weeks were like a storm that wouldn't let up. The press attacks came in waves, each one more personal than the last. Articles were published questioning Lucas's credibility, his background, even his very character. The trolls on social media made things worse. They targeted Lucas's race, his upbringing, and his motives. There were whispers behind closed doors that he wasn't qualified to lead such a massive project. For a brief moment, the weight of it all nearly crushed him. He questioned whether he was strong enough to keep going, whether the dream was worth the fight. But then, he remembered why he started. He remembered the faces of the people who had reached out to him, telling him that his platform had changed their lives. He remembered the countless young people, like Tasha, who were using his company to chase their own dreams. He remembered the moment when he first decided that he would be the one to make a difference. He couldn't back down now. It was late one night, as Lucas was scrolling through his social media, reading the latest round of attacks, that he saw something that changed everything. A tweet had gone viral, one that was unlike all the others. It was from a young woman named Tasha, the same one who had shared her story earlier. "I wouldn't be here without Lucas. He built something that helped me change my life. If you think I'm the only one, you're wrong. So many people are with him. We're the proof. The tweet was filled with replies from others, stories from people who had used the platform to find jobs, start businesses, and connect with mentors. It was a reminder of the real impact Lucas had made, something that no smear campaign could take away. Lucas's phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "We've got this," Ethan texted. "The people are with you. Don't let the noise win." The message was simple, but it was the clarity that Lucas needed. He had always known that success wasn't just about the business. It was about the people. And now, the people were speaking louder than ever. The next day, Lucas made a decision. He was no longer going to be silent. The attacks would continue, but he would no longer cower in the face of them. He scheduled an impromptu press conference. This time, there would be no rehearsed speeches, no strategic messaging. Lucas was going to speak from the heart. As the cameras flashed, Lucas stood in front of the crowd, his voice steady. "There's something that's been bothering me about the way this entire situation has been portrayed. People have been trying to tear me down, because of where I come from, because of my background, and because of the success I've built. But you know what? I'm not just here for myself. I'm here for everyone who's ever been told they're not good enough, not smart enough, not capable enough. I'm here for the kids who grew up like I did, who didn't have the easy path. I'm here for everyone who's ever had a dream." He paused, letting the words sink in. "And to those who think they can take me down with lies and attacks, let me tell you this. You can't stop the truth. You can't stop the people. This movement is bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us. And no matter what you throw at me, I'll keep moving forward. I'll keep building." The room was silent, the energy in the air palpable. Lucas had just made it clear. He wasn't just fighting for a business, he was fighting for a cause. As Lucas stood before the media, he realized that this was more than a turning point. It was the moment he took full ownership of his story. Now, he turned to you, the reader, the dreamer, the doer. What's your story? What's the dream you're fighting for? The road won't always be easy, but nothing worth having ever is. It's time to take a stand, to fight for what you believe in. The world is watching. What will you do with the spotlight? Stand with Lucas. Stand with all those who are pushing past the barriers. And let's change the world together. The time is now. The choice is yours. What are you waiting for? The following weeks were filled with both tension and hope. The press conference had been a game changer. It had drawn a line in the sand. Lucas wasn't just another businessman. He had become the face of something bigger. The media attacks only fueled the fire. But now, they had a new narrative to contend with. The story of a man who rose from the ashes of adversity, one who wasn't going to let anyone dictate his worth. As the backlash continued, Lucas was in the eye of the storm. Every step he took, every decision he made was scrutinized. He had expected it, but nothing could prepare him for the extent of the hostility. Still, he wasn't alone. The support flooded in from every corner. Messages of encouragement poured in. Tasha, the young woman who had tweeted in his defense, reached out again. She was organizing a group of like-minded individuals, and they were ready to rally behind him. "I've never seen anything like this before," she wrote. "We're ready to fight with you. Let's show them what it means to believe in something." Lucas smiled. For the first time in a while, he felt a surge of confidence. He was no longer just fighting for his company. He was fighting for a movement, for a community of people who believed in what he represented. It was a Thursday when the email came. Elon Musk wanted to meet again. Lucas had mixed feelings. He respected Elon, but the pressure of the past few weeks had worn him thin. Still, this could be the breakthrough he needed. He arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in the city, away from the chaos that seemed to follow him everywhere. When he arrived, Elon was already there, waiting at a corner booth. His usual energy was tempered, and there was a quiet intensity in his eyes. "Lucas, I've been following everything," Elon said, "not wasting time with pleasantries. And I think you've made a huge impact. The world needs more people like you." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "I'm just trying to stay true to myself." "That's what I'm talking about," Elon replied. "I've been through my own battles, you know that. The media, the skeptics, the people who think you're not qualified or capable. But I'll tell you something I've learned. The only thing that matters is that you stay focused. You can't listen to the noise. The only opinion that counts is the one you have of yourself. Lucas nodded slowly. It was advice he had heard before, but coming from Elon, it felt different. You've got a choice to make now, Elon continued. You've got the power to change things. People will follow you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Keep pushing. It's not going to be easy, but nothing worth doing ever is. As the days passed, Lucas threw himself into his work, his leadership under constant examination. The media continued to target him, digging into every aspect of his life. They searched for weaknesses, for something to exploit. But Lucas was determined. He had come too far to turn back now. But there was something else, something deeper, that kept him going. The people, the messages, the stories of how his platform was changing lives, one person at a time. And then, just as Lucas thought things couldn't get worse, an unexpected twist came. The board of directors, the very people who had been with him from the beginning, called for an emergency meeting. They had concerns about the company's future, about Lucas's ability to lead it through the storm. Lucas walked into the boardroom, his mind racing. This was it, the moment of reckoning. The board members sat at the long table, their faces unreadable. The silence in the room was deafening. Lucas, one of them, a stern-faced woman named Sandra, began. We've been following your progress, and we're concerned. The company is under attack from all sides, and we don't think you're handling it well. The media is tearing you apart, and your leadership is in question. Lucas felt his heart race. He had anticipated this. He had known it was coming, but it still hurt. The doubt, the judgment, it all hit harder than he expected. I understand your concerns, Lucas said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. But let me tell you something, this is not just about numbers and media. This is about the people, the ones who believe in what we're doing. We can't turn our backs on them. Sandra's gaze softened, but only slightly. We're not saying you should give up, Lucas, but you need to rethink your approach. You need to understand that this could cost the company everything. I understand what's at stake, Lucas replied, locking eyes with each of the board members. But I'm not going to abandon what we've built. I'm not going to back down. If you're with me, we'll rise. If not, then I'll go down fighting. But I'll never walk away. The room went silent. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the board members began to nod. Sandra spoke again, this time with a trace of respect in her voice. All right, Lucas. We'll back you. But this better be worth it. Lucas nodded, a small smile breaking through the tension. It will be. I promise you that. With the board's backing, Lucas returned to his fight with renewed determination. The media attacks didn't stop, but now, he had the backing of his team, his supporters, and most importantly, himself. It was time to shift the narrative. It was no longer about defending himself. It was about leading with purpose. Lucas knew that the real battle wasn't just against the media or the critics. It was about proving that what he was doing was bigger than all of them. And with that realization, he began to take more risks. He launched new initiatives, expanded the platform's reach, and started investing in communities that had supported him from the beginning. The movement was gaining traction, and Lucas was no longer just a businessman. He had become a symbol of resilience, a beacon for those who had been told they couldn't succeed because of where they came from or who they were. The road ahead would not be easy. The attacks would continue. But Lucas knew he had the strength to face whatever came next. And now, as the winds of change began to pick up speed, he knew he wasn't walking this path alone. What about you? Are you ready to rise above the noise? To face the challenges that lie ahead with the same courage that Lucas has? It's not enough to just stand by and watch. Now is the time to act. What's your fight? What's your dream? The world is waiting for you to take the first step. What are you going to do next? Lucas sat back in his office chair, staring out of the large windows. The city buzzed below, but inside, everything felt still, as if time had come to a halt. The fight, the struggle, it had all led to this moment. Yet, despite the progress, there was a nagging feeling in his chest that wouldn't let go. He had come so far, but there was still so much more to be done. The company was growing. Thanks to the board's support, the backlash from the media had started to lose its edge. But Lucas knew that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about changing the system, about showing the world that success wasn't defined by the color of your skin, your past, or the obstacles in your way. It was defined by your ability to persevere and stay true to yourself. He took a deep breath and picked up his phone. There was a message from Tasha, the young woman who had helped lead the charge in supporting him through the darkest moments. Her words were always encouraging, and this time, they were no different. "We're still here, Lucas. The movement is growing, and we're ready to take the next step. We've got people lined up, willing to stand by your side." Lucas smiled, feeling a surge of hope, but he couldn't let himself get comfortable. Not yet. There was still so much to be done. The next day, Lucas stood before a new challenge. The old guard, the traditional investors, the ones who had only seen numbers and profit margins, were calling for a meeting. They wanted answers, and they weren't interested in hearing about the movement, the growth, or the bigger picture. To them, the company's bottom line was all that mattered. Lucas wasn't intimidated. He knew their concerns, but he also knew that he had to stay true to the path he had chosen. If they wanted to leave, they were welcome to. But he wasn't backing down. As he walked into the boardroom, the usual cold, calculating atmosphere settled over him. The men and women around the table weren't interested in change. They were interested in security. They wanted to know what his next move would be, and if it didn't promise immediate results, they'd be gone. "We've seen the headlines," one of the investors, a sharply dressed man named Richard, said as he leaned back in his chair. "The media is still attacking you. There's uncertainty surrounding your leadership. And yet, you continue to push forward with this cause. We need results, Lucas, not ideals." Lucas took a moment to steady himself. This was the moment he had been preparing for. "You're right," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "I'm not here to sell you just numbers. But let me tell you something. What we're doing isn't about immediate profits. It's about building something sustainable, something that will last. We're creating a legacy, not just a company. And that's what people want to be a part of. They want to believe in something bigger than just making money." The room was silent. The investors exchanged uncertain glances, but Lucas could see the seeds of doubt being planted. He had their attention, but he needed to make them believe. "I'm not asking for your approval," Lucas continued. "I'm showing you that the world is changing. People are looking for businesses that stand for something, businesses that represent their values. That's where the future is. If you want to stick to the old way, fine. But I'm going forward, with or without you." There was a tense pause before Sandra, one of the more open-minded board members, spoke up. "And what if we don't see the results you're promising?" Lucas didn't flinch. "You'll see them. It'll take time. But we're laying the foundation for something that can't be ignored. The movement is gaining momentum, and with it, so will our success." Over the following weeks, Lucas pushed forward. He strengthened his alliances, built new relationships, and reached out to communities that had been overlooked for too long. His presence in the media shifted from a target to a symbol of change. The message was clear. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a leader with a purpose. The challenges didn't stop. If anything, they intensified. The pressure from the old guard mounted, and the media continued to scrutinize his every move. But Lucas had learned how to navigate the noise. The attacks no longer affected him the way they once did. He had built a support system that was unwavering, and with each passing day, he grew more confident in his ability to lead. And then, the breakthrough came. A viral campaign sparked by Tasha and other supporters pushed the company's message of change to new heights. People from all walks of life began to rally around Lucas, not just because of his success, but because they believed in his vision. They believed that what he was building could create a ripple effect that reached far beyond the company's bottom line. The day came when Lucas was called back to the boardroom. This time, it wasn't just the investors. It was a full meeting of the board, including Sandra, Richard, and a few new faces. The atmosphere was tense, but there was something different about it this time. There was a quiet respect in the room. "We've been watching," Sandra said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. "And the results are starting to show. Your message is getting through. People are responding. The company's numbers are beginning to improve, but more importantly, the movement is growing. People believe in what you're doing." Lucas felt a surge of pride, but he didn't let it show. This was only the beginning. We're on the edge of something big, he said, his voice steady. But I need your support. This isn't just about numbers anymore. It's about creating a legacy. Will you stand with me? There was a long silence before Sandra spoke again. We're with you, Lucas. We see what you're doing now. You've proven us wrong, and we'll stand by you. As the meeting ended, Lucas walked out of the boardroom with a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead was still uncertain, but now, for the first time, he felt like he wasn't walking it alone. The media might still be watching, the old guard might still have their doubts, but Lucas had something they didn't, a community of people who believed in him, people who were ready to follow him into whatever came next. And with that thought, he knew one thing for sure. This fight was far from over. But the battle had already been won. Lucas took his first step toward the future today. Will you take yours? The world is changing, and it's time to be part of something bigger than yourself. It's time to lead with purpose, to stand up for what you believe in. What will your legacy be? Will you be the one to challenge the status quo? To rise above the noise and make a difference? The choice is yours. What are you waiting for? The weeks that followed Lucas' victory in the boardroom were filled with both triumph and pressure. The company's public image was transforming, but the harder work had only just begun. Every new step forward seemed to bring new challenges. The media coverage had shifted from scrutiny to admiration, but there were still voices of doubt and opposition. Lucas was learning something crucial about leadership. It wasn't enough to just succeed. He had to prove over and over again that he was worthy of the trust that so many had placed in him. The pressure was suffocating at times. He found himself staring out of his office window late into the night, the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. That was when Tasha called. "Lucas, we need to talk," she said, her voice urgent. "The board's not the only challenge you're going to face. There's something bigger brewing. Someone is out to take you down. Someone powerful." Lucas' stomach dropped. He had known this day would come. Whenever someone pushed the envelope, there were always those who wanted to maintain the old ways. He had been ready for resistance from traditional investors, but this was something different. This felt personal. It wasn't long before the first signs of an orchestrated campaign against him began to emerge. It started with subtle online attacks, rumors and lies circulating about his company and his personal life. Social media platforms buzzed with negative comments, and even some of his early supporters began to question his integrity. The attacks were insidious, attacking not just his business but his character. It felt like a coordinated smear campaign, and Lucas knew it wasn't just random. Then came the phone call. "Lucas, we know what you're trying to do," a voice on the other end of the line said. "You're going too far. You think you're untouchable? You're not. People like you, people who don't know their place, they need to be reminded." The voice was cold, anonymous, but the threat was clear. Lucas' stomach churned. He had been prepared for setbacks, but this was different. This was a direct attack, not just on his business but on everything he stood for. He didn't say a word. He simply hung up. The next few days were a whirlwind. The board met again. Tasha, his loyal ally, warned him about the pressure that would be mounting on him. The attacks on social media escalated, and soon, public opinion started to turn. People who had once cheered for him were now questioning his motives. Some of the sponsors who had signed on to support his mission were beginning to backpedal. Their loyalty wavered by the mounting controversy. It was a test of his faith in the mission, in the people around him, and in himself. But Lucas had already proven to himself that he was capable of rising from the ashes. He couldn't let this moment defeat him. He called a meeting with Tasha and some of his closest allies in the company. He needed to hear from them, to understand their thoughts, and to find a way forward. "I've been thinking," Lucas said as he sat at the head of the table, his fingers tapping against the surface. "This is more than just a corporate battle now. This is about whether we're going to let the forces of the old world control the future." Tasha nodded. "They want you to fall. They want to remind you of your place. But Lucas, you've come too far to back down now." "I'm not backing down," Lucas said, his voice firm. "But I need all of you by my side. We've built this company together. And we've built something bigger than just profits. It's about standing up for the future, for what's right." With his resolve renewed, Lucas began to take more strategic steps to combat the attacks. He knew he had to remain calm, not let the pressure cause him to make rash decisions. He couldn't afford to make this battle personal, even though every part of him wanted to confront those behind the smear campaign head-on. Instead, he turned his focus to transparency. He reached out to the public, to his supporters, and reminded them of what he had been fighting for. He shared the truth, how far he had come, and the mission he had for the future. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The attacks on him continued, but they lost their power. People began to see through the lies. His supporters, the ones who had believed in his mission, stood by him more resolutely than ever. Lucas refused to allow the hate and lies to define him. The turning point came unexpectedly. In the midst of the chaos, Lucas received an invitation to speak at a major national conference about leadership and diversity. It was an opportunity to stand in front of hundreds of influential people and declare, once and for all, that he was not backing down. The moment felt surreal. He had been invited because of the change he was advocating for, because of the path he had chosen to walk. On the day of the speech, Lucas stood before a packed auditorium, his heart racing. As he looked out at the sea of faces, a wave of confidence washed over him. He wasn't just speaking for himself anymore. He was speaking for everyone who had been silenced, for everyone who had been told they didn't belong. Leadership, Lucas said, his voice echoing through the room, isn't about being at the top. It's about lifting others as you rise. It's about breaking down the walls that divide us and building something stronger in their place. The crowd erupted in applause. For the first time in weeks, Lucas felt a true sense of peace. He knew the road ahead would be hard, but he had proven to himself and to the world that he was unshakable. Lucas had taken a stand. He had refused to be silenced, refused to back down in the face of adversity. The question is, what will you do? Will you stand up for what you believe in, even when the world seems determined to knock you down? Will you fight for a future where your voice matters? The choice is yours. What path will you choose? Let's hear from you. Share your thoughts, your story. How have you faced the giants in your life? How have you stayed true to your mission, even when it seemed impossible? The world is watching. Your move. The applause from the audience at the leadership conference echoed in Lucas' ears as he stepped off the stage. The weight of the moment, the culmination of everything he had worked for, felt almost surreal. For months, he had battled his inner doubts, the public attacks, and the ever-growing pressure of being a leader who was both a symbol of change and a target for those who resisted it. But now, standing before a crowd of influential voices, he felt like he had truly found his purpose. The press had caught wind of his speech, and the media coverage exploded with praise. The negative rumors were silenced for the moment, replaced by admiration and respect for the man who had overcome so much. Lucas' message had resonated far beyond the boardrooms and offices. It had struck a chord with everyday people, with those who felt like their voices were never heard, with those who had been told they didn't belong. His story had become a rallying cry for the oppressed, for the marginalized, for those who dared to challenge the status quo. As the weeks passed, Lucas continued to push his company forward, but it wasn't just about profits anymore. It was about legacy. It was about creating something that would last. A company that wasn't just focused on financial success, but on creating opportunities for everyone, regardless of background. It was about shaping a world where people of color, like him, could rise and lead without fear of being pushed down by the system. However, the success came with its own set of challenges. As Lucas began to solidify his place in the business world, the old guard, the powerful forces who had once tried to tear him down, started to regroup. They weren't done with him yet. They couldn't simply let go of their control, not after all they had invested in keeping the system the way it was. Lucas could feel the tension mounting again. The subtle pressure that had been building for weeks now felt more like a threat. Behind closed doors, corporate executives who had once supported him began to waver. They spoke about compromises, about keeping things the way they were, for the sake of the business. Lucas knew they wanted him to tone down his rhetoric, to stop pushing the boundaries. They didn't want a leader who upset the status quo. But Lucas was no longer the same person he had been when he first started. He had faced the dark side of business, the prejudices, the obstacles, and had come out stronger for it. He had learned that true leadership wasn't just about winning battles. It was about staying true to the cause, even when it wasn't the easiest path to take. The situation came to a head at a major shareholders meeting. The room was filled with investors and executives, and Lucas could feel their eyes on him, waiting for him to make a move. Tasha stood by his side, her usual calm demeanor now replaced by a sharp, determined edge. She knew this was the moment that would determine the future of the company. Lucas, one of the older investors, Mr. Jenkins, said, "You've done remarkable things for the company, but your leadership, your approach, it's too risky. You're putting everything we've worked for at stake." Lucas stood up, looking around the room at the faces of the people who had made their fortunes off the backs of others. He could see the fear in their eyes, the fear of losing control. He knew that they would do whatever it took to maintain their dominance. But Lucas wasn't afraid anymore. He had already fought the battle within himself. This was just another obstacle to overcome. "You want to know what's at stake?" Lucas asked, his voice steady and clear. "It's not the company. It's not the money. It's the future. We can keep living in the past, playing by the same tired rules, or we can create something better. I've never been afraid of change. The real question is, are you?" There was a silence in the room, a heavy tension as the board members exchanged nervous glances. But Lucas could see the cracks beginning to form in their resolve. They knew, deep down, that they couldn't stop the change that was coming, not without losing everything they had built. Mr. Jenkins spoke again, his voice quieter now. "You've made your point, but what do you plan to do next?" Lucas smiled, a sense of finality in his words. "I'm not backing down. This company, this vision, it's bigger than any of us, and I'll fight to the end to see it realized." With that, Lucas turned to Tasha. She nodded, her confidence unwavering. It was clear that the battle had been won, not just in that room, but in the hearts of the people who had believed in him all along. Lucas knew the fight wasn't over. There would always be those who wanted to hold on to the old ways. But he also knew that he had ignited something that couldn't be extinguished. The vision he had for the future was now in motion. The company was growing, not just in revenue, but in influence, in power, and in the ability to make a real difference. More importantly, Lucas had discovered his true calling. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a symbol, a living example of what could happen when someone dared to challenge the world as it was. And that was a legacy worth fighting for. As he sat in his office, looking out at the skyline, Lucas thought about the road he had traveled. He had gone from the boy who was written off by the world to the man who would one day change it. So, what about you? Are you ready to challenge the world as it is? Are you prepared to push through the barriers that stand in your way? Lucas' story is a reminder that no matter where you start, or how impossible the odds seem, change is possible if you believe in it. Now it's your turn. What's your story? How will you take action? Share your thoughts, your challenges, and your triumphs. The journey may be long, but the first step starts with you. The world is waiting. What will you do next?